All right, so wanted to talk a little bit about change directives in the 3 versions of OAKS-CI, because we obviously still have a lot of agency and school facilities versions of OAKS-CI that are in construction today. And then we're just beginning to get version 2 projects that may get to the point where they need to do a change order. I think Todd's probably the first one to come in and try to do a change order in version 2. And we made some very substantial changes between the earlier versions and version 2. If you went and looked for a change directive business process in either the agency or school facilities versions, you would not find one. In both cases, change directives were a part of the change order process. So in agency, you would have found it under change order as a workflow, and in school facilities, you would have found it under contract modifications, again, as a workflow. And you would have started that workflow, and basically what you would have gotten is a process to develop and get signed a change order document, and to capture the key information from that document in OAKS-CI. And then it would have taken you right into a proposal request workflow, and it would have assumed that 100% of our change directives became proposal requests. So we're always going to change the cost or time based on a change directive. Some of the feedback we got when we were working to design version 2 was that that wasn't always the case, and that sometimes change directives were hanging out in the change order log for literally years and never became a change order per se. So it was somewhat disruptive to have them in there, and it was one of the reasons that all of the AEs keep a change order log outside of OAKS-CI. That's the real change order log. So we were trying to address some of those concerns. So in version 2, we broke apart the modification processes into the 5 different business processes you see there, and change directive is one of those. So change directive is now its own standalone business process. In addition, change directives don't affect the schedule of values in any way. So basically what we did was say, hey, let's make a BP that deals with the document that is a change directive. And then if we need to, we can create a change order behind it. And we can even spawn that change directive, that change order from the change directive if we need to. So that was the approach that we took in version 2. What we ended up with, what we have in production today, is a standalone change directive business process with 2 available workflows. And these were not intuitive when we started the design process, but as we talked about it, this is where we ended up. There's kind of 2 ways that that change directive document can get created. You can be at a job meeting and have the change directive form in paper form at the job meeting and create a change directive. It can be completed with pen and ink and everybody available to sign it, and you give it to the contractor and the change directive has been issued. So in terms of getting the work done, you've taken care of that. And now we have to account for the work, both in terms of project history and in terms of, if I want to do a change order, well, what were the terms that were written on that piece of paper that we filled out at the job meeting? So what we did is, on the right side of the screen here, you can see the paper issued workflow, where a change directive is created. The key information is added to that change order, and then it can either be issued with change order or issued without change order. If you issue it with change order, it's going to go off and give you a second step to actually spawn that change order. And I'll talk a little bit about what that looks like after I get through the other workflow here. So it's a very simple workflow. It's a fairly simple form. There's like a half dozen fields that you need to fill out. And then you attach a scan of the paper, and you're done. And we, since this is basically project accounting, we allow the AE, the PM, or the coordinator, any of the 3, to create these and log those. And so some method for getting that paper issued change order into the project documentation and making it referenceable from a change order if a change order should occur. And in fact, if you spawn the change order all the key data goes right into the change order directly. The other way a change directive might be created would be to not have everybody there. And we said, well, how's that going to happen? And with our current use of DocuSign, we set this up to be a DocuSign kind of workflow. So we end up with the AE actually creating the change directive, and the AE would create the change directive today in both of the agency and K-12 versions as well. The PM reviews what was created and then sends it to the coordinator who has the DocuSign license to initiate a DocuSign workflow that gets all the signatures on it. Goes to what would be a pretty standard DocuSign wait step, so the coordinator waits for it to come back in DocuSign. And then similarly to the paper issued workflow, it's either issued without a change order or issued with a change order and goes through the spawn step. So the only difference here really is, did we gather our signatures on paper, pen and ink? Did we gather our signatures in DocuSign? The DocuSign workflow in the DocuSign case would include sending a copy to the contractor. You don't necessarily have the contractor sign it because change directives don't have to be signed by the contractor. Is that correct, Lane?
Yes. So the way it works is we are directing the contractor to effect a change. There is a place on the form for their concurrence, but their concurrence is not necessary for us to issue a change directive. And in fact, they may not agree with the price, and you can use a change directive in the case where you don't have agreement on what that price for the change is. And in that case, if you include the contractor in the initial DocuSign step, it could be waiting for them to sign it and it never makes it through the DocuSign workflow. So one of the things after this last situation I suggested is that we have the owner, contracting authority, and the architect all sign the change directive, and then issue it through DocuSign to the contractor if they'd like to concur that they have accepted, the change directive. But their signature is not necessary. So we just want to make sure that it doesn't get bogged down waiting for their signature, which once again is not necessary. And then once they submit a proposal, it goes through the change order process and so forth. And another thing I'd like to mention is last year we had a change order audit by OBM. And one of the change orders that was selected for audit included a change directive. And that change directive was signed by the project manager, and it was right up to the limit of their authority, which was $50,000, is $50,000. And apparently, once the pricing started coming in, they realized it was over the project manager's authority, and so they kind of converted it into a proposal request. But the documentation in OAKS wasn't clear, and so they gave us a minor comment about that, saying that we needed to have a better process. So one of the key things to remember with a change directive is the signature levels of authority are the same as they are for a change order. So if you have a change order that's $60,000, that needs to be signed by a program manager. If it's $110,000, it needs to be signed by the chief of projects. And if it's $300,000, it needs to be signed by Cheryl. So just like a change order.
But Lane, this is a question from this is Ramsey question. If that situation happened where the PM signed on the directive, assuming it's 50 or less, and then the pricing comes in and it's over,
right?
We would just then process it as a change order knowing that it's going to go up the chain of command. I mean, I'm not
So
seeing why we need to insert any more activity. Why do we need to issue a request for proposal at that time?
So if you have authorized them to do the work, they're only authorized to do up to $50,000 worth of work. The change directive cannot authorize them to do more than that. If you want to authorize them, once again, like on a time and material basis, you would need to issue another change directive signed by the appropriate party
Okay.
authorizing the additional work. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes.
Steve, I'm not sure how that would work in OCI, whether it would be a new change directive record, or if at that point you can return it for clarification where it gets upgraded to a higher level.
So it would be a new change directive record because change directives are kind of designed to get to closure pretty quickly. So you're gonna be at the end step once it's been signed and issued. But you can always put in a new record and reference the original, and work from there. Okay. If there isn't any more discussion there, I think I actually have a couple more slides I wanted to look at, and then I was going to go show you what this looks like in OCI just briefly. So sign change directive must be attached to the record. So basically, this is your this is your record of that particular change directive, and that attachment can either be DocuSign or a scan of the paper. And we talked earlier about change directives being able to spawn a change order record, and the workflow will actually come up with two workflow options. One is to issue with change order. You do that when you're going to spawn a change order, and the second one is to issue without a change order. And then if you actually do the one where you spawn a change order, the spawn change order record will go to the architect for evaluation. So they're going to get a new task on their task list that says that there's a change order for them, and it's been sent to them for evaluation. And then the AE would take that and initiate a proposal request with the contractor if he thought that was appropriate. He can also just terminate it at that point if it's no change order is necessary. So that's kind of the way that the spawning process would work. And the nice thing about the spawning process is it does create tasks. So there'll be a task on the task list in the project and a task on the overall task list for the architect to deal with. And that change order record's actually out there already, so he doesn't need to create a new change order record. He's just going to use the change order record that was spawned and work from there. Let me get out of my presentation here for a second, and let's look at, so I have the version 2 change directive business process here in a test project that we maintain. This is actually in the production environment, but it's a test project. And if I go in here and do create, I'm going to see that there are two workflows available. One is called the DocuSign issued change directive, and the second is called the paper issued change directive. So if you know what you're looking for, that's pretty clear. The AE will see both of these. If you go in as a PM or project coordinator, you don't actually have authority to start a DocuSign one. Those are started by the AE. So, but you do have authority to take a paper issued change order and record it. So you would get the paper issued workflow. You would not see both of these options. And if we go to either one of these, you're going to get the same, basically the same form. So let's let the form come up here. It's going to have a title for the change directive. You're going to select a contract name, and that's going to come from the contracts that are available on your project. And this is a test project, so there's no telling how many contracts are out here, but you would pick a particular contract, just like you do any place else. At this point, it's set up to have a contract modification number, and I welcome feedback on some of these things, whether we should make that optional or not. or whether we use those or not, but I believe contract modification numbers are included in the original environments, so they got carried forward into this environment. And then copy in the description of the work and justification, because these required fields on here are the fields that the spawn is going to carry forward into the change order, and they're used in the change order process. So you may be familiar with the change directive bases. So you would pick as the appropriate one from here. If this is a paper based one, that would have been filled out, hopefully on the original paper form. It's available there. And the same thing from the change directive cost basis. So how are we going to cost this when it does become a change order? So that's basically, whoops, I love that. That's basically what you're doing here. There's a selection for a contact, and that's kind of optional. Again, the form has that on it, and you're typically dealing with a particular person there. This, like a lot of the contact forms in OAKS, you can do a user select, which will take you to the user directory. You can also just type in the names. So if it's somebody who's not actually an OAKS user, who is your contact, maybe a foreman on site that doesn't use OAKS, you can put the name in directly, and the form will be just fine with that. So that's what the form and the process looks like, and then you just process it like you would any other record. Questions?
Steve, just a comment about the custom print. If you do use the custom print through the DocuSign process, the form date is a little old, and it doesn't match the change directive paper version. But it is correct. It's like a 2013 form. It doesn't mean it's not the current one. So just know that it's a little out of sequence with the paper version, and that's okay.
Good to know.
Hey, Steve, this is Patrick. I noticed that you said the contact name was optional, but it looked like the last name had a red asterisk to it. Does that mean it's required?
Oh, it does, doesn't it? Yes, it does. And again, as you begin to use this, you can give me some feedback in terms of ways you might want to update this. So this would typically go in, and this is what we call a user data picker. So this is actually picking from the universe. So the best way to do this is to come in and do a search and find the particular individual that you want to deal with. And then what it should do, assuming my information's actually in here. So it brought me back, and so if we had address information for me in there, it would have come in as well. And you can see it brought in my phone and email address. So it's going to bring forward all the information that it has for that particular person. But you can also just click on the box here and type in whatever name needs to go in there, and satisfy that requirement. So, and this is a workflow where we're going to put in there. All right, so at that point, I ought to be able to send this forward. Not quite. I need contract name still. Oh. And here's my contract. See why I don't process these live on recorded video very often. So now I ought to be able to send this forward, and my workflow option is to submit it, and it's going to go to the project manager, and it'll go to him for PM review. And then the rest of the workflow goes through. It'll go to the project coordinator, and they'll put it in the DocuSign and get it created there. They would obviously use the custom print to create the form, which may be one of the reasons why contact is required here, is it needs to be on that custom print. The coordinator needs to know who they're going to send this to at the PM firm, so or at the construction firm. So it makes sense that it's required in the DocuSign version of this. All right, other questions? Hearing none, I will turn it back over to Ramsey.